Welcome back, everybody, to the 706 podcast, where we break down, discuss, rate, nominate, vote on, belittle, what else do? We excoriate films, good and bad. It doesn't really matter. We're indiscriminate in that way. We're full of hot takes over here, talking about the 706 potentially best films of all time. At least that's the canon we're aiming for. It's a kind of a somber mood right now among the group here. Tony had a kind of an awkward comment. He wanted us to take a moment of silence for the death of O.J. Simpson. I politely declined. I think, Tony, you can save that for later and kind of keep that stuff to yourself.
Can we be respectful? That's all I'm asking, guys. Can we be
Yeah.
respectful?
I know, Tony. It's what is it to know a man is to understand him? Is that what you told me? I forget what the quote is, but anyways, we're here to talk. Well, actually, we are here to talk, but let's do some introductions. So my name's Kirk. I'm hosting today's episode. Let's go around and introduce ourselves. Tony, Anthony, and Connor, just say hi. Maybe I don't know, your favorite OJ moment. You can pass on that. Anything you'd like.
Hi, I'm Tony. Probably his Hertz commercial.
He did well for Hertz. He did well. Anthony.
Anthony.
Oh, okay. Anthony abstains. To Connor.
I'm Connor. I'm definitely for OJ content. I'm definitely going to recommend the 30 for 30. That has nothing to do with his sports career at all, but it's just about this one day where he was chased, the car chase, and all that. Amazing documentary. It's a must see.
It is a must see, and
absolutely
one of the most monolithic days, culturally speaking, of the last 30 years. Outside of days involving mass casualties and terrorist attacks and elections. But anyways, we're here today to talk about the 2012 film, The Place Beyond the Pines, which I often mistakenly refer to as The Place Between the Pines, but it's actually The Place Beyond the Pines, starring Ryan Gosling, Bradley Cooper, and Eva Mendes. Mahershala Ali's in here. There's some other folks. Ben Mendelsohn, who was this guy who was really glammed up in the 2010s, and I think he's kind of fallen off a little bit. I haven't really seen him in anything recently. But yeah, we're here to talk about this film, written and directed by Derek Cianfrance, which I did look up the pronunciation, Cianfrance. It's one of those names where you're not quite sure until you hear it. And the movie is kind of a little bit of an epic story about two gentlemen, two people living in, New York, upstate. One is kind of down on his luck, on the periphery of society. Carney, played by Ryan Gosling, who is kind of tacitly forced into, or not forced, but motivated to commit some bank robberies to try to win back or win over the mother of his child, played by Eva Mendes. And the other individual, or the other main the other protagonist in the film, I would say, is Bradley Cooper. Maybe you could consider, I don't know what the right term is. I mean, he might, I would consider him a protagonist. He's, a cop in Schenectady, New York. He actually, their lives intersect when, after a botched bank robbery, Bradley Cooper guns down Ryan Gosling in a morally dubious situation where he actually kind of was trigger happy and killed Ryan Gosling's character, Luke, unbeknownst to anybody else, in a situation where he didn't necessarily have to shoot. So that's kind of the first act. And then we move into the aftermath of the shooting. We understand that both men have 1-year-old sons, and we're dealing with the fallout of this violent event. And about 2/3 of the way in, the third act transitions to 15 years later, where the two sons are now in their adolescence and their paths cross serendipitously. But I'll leave it at that. It's kind of definitely an interesting film, in my opinion. One that bucks a lot of trends, and I can appreciate it for that. It also frustrates me at times. As you all know, I'm a kind of rigid conventionalist when it comes to films. And so sometimes these artistic decisions can irk me. But in this case, I feel like Derek landed the plane. But let's go around and talk a little bit about first impressions. So Tony had seen it. Funnily enough, Anthony is not sure if he's seen it, so we're gonna hopefully explore that a little bit further. Maybe that does not portend well for his vote if he's not even sure if he remembers seeing it. Maybe it was on like a JetBlue cross country flight or something, but definitely not going to start with him. We'll throw you in the middle, Anthony. So let's start with Connor. I always like to hear somebody's impressions of the film, kind of undiluted or adulterated by, a repeat watcher's perspective. So Connor, why don't you lead us off here with your take on this film?
First of all, I have to disagree with you, Kirk, about the pronunciation of his name. According to Wikipedia, if I'm reading this correctly, it's Cianfrance. I don't know how French it's supposed to be, but we can table that. No, I'm messing.
No, yeah, you're right. It was
France.
I heard him say his own name in a clip, and I probably overemphasized the A. I made it a hard A.
Which I have not heard him say his name. But anyway, Cianfrance, I think it's interesting. I think also maybe different from the rest of you. We watched Sound of Metal for this podcast. That was my introduction to him, and I loved that movie. So that provided a kind of thing against which to measure this movie. Some things that I liked that were similar, kind of the naturalism, the understated kind of style of it. I did feel that in terms of the subject, this is kind of, Sound of Metal is kind of your true to life drama. It definitely dramatizes and makes almost very archetypal and huge, sort of obviously a very personal experience of losing one's hearing. Obviously, we're not talking about Sound of Metal here. This movie, I felt, was very much like, it had a kind of mythical, sort of archetypal, in some ways, I guess, generic. I mean, obviously not in the way it is laid out, not in the way that the plot structure works, but in terms of its like subject, its basic description, you can kind of imagine something like this: the parallel of the kind of the cop and the robber, and these two generations that could take place right at any time. And I was reminded a lot. I'm curious to hear what Kirk says about kind of the cultural or the temporal like specificity of this movie. We know that it. I didn't realize there's a time skip. Obviously, there's a couple skips that are surprising. First of all, there's moments that are surprising where we're following Luke, who then dies unexpectedly. We follow the character who kills him. Then we skip forward in time. So that has this surprising quality to it that kept me very interested beyond just what I was seeing. I'm not sure about the temporal specificity. We get one mention of the paging in the first temporal instance, and then it skips ahead 15 years, which is more or less the present day. So it's the late 90s, I guess. 97 to 2012. Okay, sorry if I missed that it was mentioned specifically. But sorry, that's just an aside. The temporal specificity of this movie, because I feel like, isn't this kind of a story of an anti-hero and a bad cop? Doesn't it kind of almost, couldn't you have had this movie in like the 1970s, the early 70s, some of the movies that I know Anthony and I like to talk about? But beyond that, I mean, obviously I loved all the performances. I thought it was interesting, but there were some things that kind of like strained belief that I felt like it almost leaned too much into an almost not naturalistic enough kind of zone, where I think some things were kind of glossed over. I kind of had myself wondering at times, like, what would this really happen? Does this really make sense? And I felt that, like, if I was able to kind of turn my brain off and say, oh, this is a kind of timeless story, yes. But if it is supposed to take place in our world, in Schenectady, which I've never been to, but it felt like it lacked some specificity or something that a groundedness, that I would have liked to have seen. But okay, that's kind of my initial first blush kind of response. But I don't want to talk too much. We can talk about the specifics as we go.
Okay, Connor, thank you. Really appreciate you bringing forth the temporal aspect of the film, which I think is probably the most unique aspect of it. I'm not really sure. If you asked somebody about what how would you describe Place Beyond the Pines, they might say, well, it's either this very well done, drawn out, sweeping story, or they might say it's disjointed, right? It's usually one's opinion kind of hinges on that fact. So I think that's definitely something we want to talk about more. Anthony, go ahead with your first/second opinion of this film.
Sure. As I was saying, I don't know if this is before we started recording, but I had thought I'd seen this movie before, but as I was watching, I had one of these moments where things felt familiar, but at the same time, certain scenes were not necessarily clicking to a memory or to a specific memory. And nothing really kind of settled in by the end of it, which doesn't necessarily have a good or negative meaning. It's been years since it originally came out. I think Connor's right. And starting this film, though, we start off with what would seem to be a sort of almost noir in the modern day, or in the late 90s, sort of a storyline with the Ryan Gosling character trying to care for his son, who he's recently discovered, trying to make something of himself. And of course, he turns to the illegal act of bank robbing. Now, I think that part had me sort of captivated for a number of different reasons. The most obvious one being it has a kind of propulsion and excitement to it. I found the scenes of him robbing the bank somewhat hilarious, and somewhat honest. I thought, like, there's a part where his character is sort of yelling for the money and his voice keeps cracking. And I found that very funny in a way that I could imagine that actually happening. And also when the woman could not throw the bag over the security, like bulletproof glass, had me actually kind of, sitting up with a kind of smile on my face. Now, I think it may be worthwhile for this opening, to keep my thing short, is while all that really had me going, the part where the movie really drags for me is actually the middle. I don't find myself that interested in Avery, which is Bradley Cooper's character. Avery, who is the cop who killed Ryan Gosling's character in the first act, as we have come to learn about him from the first third. Avery is a kind of more morally honest type character in some ways than the other police around him. He's willing to be honest about the kind of crooked activity happening within the station, and he's willing to kind of reckon with the deed that he kind of has made him sort of famous, and which it is eventually going to kind of elevate his career. Now, all that seems kind of fine on like a screenplay sort of level or in a story beat sort of level, but I just don't find myself that interested. And I don't know if it's because I don't find Bradley Cooper as an actor sort of interesting, if there's a kind of thing that needs to be drawn out on his movie stardom that I'm missing, or if it's that in comparison to where the movie was coming from and where it eventually goes, it's just a lull, and a lull that gets dragged out too far. Now, I also bring up a criticism of this part because I find Avery not drawn out enough at the same time for us to have that climactic scene at the end in which Dane DeHaan, I can never remember any of the characters' names. Dane DeHaan, Ryan Gosling's character's son in the film, holds him at gunpoint after kind of beating his own son up. I don't find a kind of catharsis in this moment because I never really cared for Avery, and I don't know enough about Avery to feel for this sort of scene. So I'd be curious to know what people think of that part, because that's kind of a shadow that hangs from I suppose the last hour and a half of the film. I don't even know when time wise this happens. But I find it a significant enough shadow that sort of detracts from the experience of the movie for me. And I have a lot of things about what I wish the movie was, which is kind of unfair, I think, about it. But I do overall find it a solid film. But I think it had an opportunity to be a great one, and I just wish it kind of took certain plunges that it didn't. And yeah, we'll get more into it, I think, as we go.
All right, fair enough. Was expecting a little warmer of a reception for the place beyond the pines, but that's all right. I can always count on Tony to carry here, to be my whip in the caucus here. Tony, go ahead.
Kirk, where am I going to start? I am filled with disgust, frankly, shame, horror. No, I think this movie is pretty good. I think, see, I remember enjoying it the first time, and then I kind of second guessed. I think it was literally, I saw like a tweet from Film Court Hulk saying that movie's like dog shit or something. It was like very aggressive. And I was like, maybe it is bad. And that's like I was questioning my initial impression of it because I didn't remember it that well. I watched it like with my mom, and I don't know, maybe that wasn't the ideal setting. But when I came back to it this time and kind of my critical eye, I found that I was very drawn in by the movie, like just the movements of it. I think Cianfrance, I think if I said that right, I don't know. I think that his directorial eye is so strong. I think these images have such a grit to them with the 35 millimeter photography. The movie is just gorgeous to look at. Like the images are so rich and beautiful. You've got music by Mike Patton, like Mr. Bungle Mike Patton, and it's great. And just the cadence of the movie drew me in. And I think that yes, that first sequence with Ryan Gosling, that first like opening half hour, 40-minute stretch or whatever, is so captivating, just in the simplicity of the story, the clarity of it, where every scene advances that plot, and just that sense of menace, that sense of doom that hangs over everything, where it's just baked in that it's going to go horribly wrong. And every scene you're just getting closer and closer to that inevitable failure. And like, I love the bank robbery scenes too, because like they are funny and like they're pathetic and they're sad. And we know this guy, the really sad thing about this character is, he doesn't want to hurt anybody. He genuinely does not, but he's doing this thing that's going to get himself killed and like destroy his family. So it's very tragic, and it's very compelling in that classical tragic way. So the movie does this incredible pivot, a third of the way, because it is essentially, as Anthony alluded to, it's really like, people describe this as being two movies because of the time skip, but it's really three. There's three separate, like, kind of narrative sequences. It's almost like an anthology film. It feels like at times. And I think that it mostly works for me watching it moment by moment, because I just get swept up in the story and the characters. Because unlike Anthony, I find Avery very compelling in his own way. And to me, I'm just swept along in the narrative. So that pivot really worked for me, because it's a very ballsy pivot. And I think the reason movies generally don't do this, because rules exist for a reason, is because if you're going to do this, you have to basically build up multiple protagonists, multiple satisfying story arcs. It's very ambitious from a writing standpoint. There's something kind of audacious about this movie. But I find that just as a viewer on an entertainment level, it really works for me. Where I think the movie falters is in the final section, because then when it tries to tie everything up, it doesn't satisfy me really. I don't like the boys that much. I like what was it? Ryan Gosling's son, Dahan. Jason. Okay. I like Jason. Okay. But the other kid was just so obnoxious. I really did not enjoy spending time with him. AJ, he's just an annoying dick. You're like, why is this kid spending any time with him? I didn't like the actor that much. And I found that plot line, that's where it really starts to feel contrived. And you really see the hand of the writers, in a way that almost felt like, the hand of fate was literally reaching in and pointing a character's head. Like, he sees the picture of the dad on the wall at the party, and then he's like, I have to get a gun. It's like, it's so over the top. It's so immediate. And I feel like that sequence would have had more impact. I mean, it's inherently contrived because you have these two characters meeting each other, which is already kind of unlikely. But the way it builds coincidence, if it had a more grounded, tragic ending for them, I think it would have hit me a little harder. And then the note the movie ends on too, where he gets on the bike and it says, or the old man says, "Have you ridden one of these before?" Like he was fated by his father that he's gonna know. He has like the genetic memory to ride a motorcycle. That's so stupid. Like that to me is a departure. But I think this movie has an amazing atmosphere, amazing tone. I think there's so many scenes of just menace. I think that metal section excels actually with Ray Liotta and the other cops. I find them very menacing. And I find myself very drawn in by that storyline as well. So anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but I like the movie. I really enjoy it, even if I do have kind of some ambivalence about its conclusion. So
Thank you, Tony. And thank you all for your candid opinions and your earnest takes on this film. And I would expect nothing less. I'm still kind of taking them in. Still really mentally shifting the tenor of this episode as we speak, because to be honest, I expected a little warmer reception. I know I've said that already, but just to give you some context as to like how I took this film in, or how I felt about it, and now currently do feel about it. So I saw it in theaters, actually. Tony, did you see the film in theaters with your mom? Or did you watch it at home?
no, I rented it from Family Video.
Oh, Family Video. There you go. Rest in peace. But so I saw this in theaters, and I don't know if anybody's seen the trailer, but it does look like a heist movie, kind of. It looks like, it's almost billed as something it's not. And that frustrated me because I didn't really have a critical eye at the time. And I'm not saying that you all are lacking that because you feel as though the first act was the best, and it objectively is, right? Like Ryan Gosling, who's now a megastar, at the time he was quite famous already, but it just feels like it feels like such a treat to walk along with him, from the kind of the oversaturated shots at the carnival all the way through to the rundown trailer park with his new buddy, his new ally and partner in crime. I forget the person's name. It just feels very, very like grounded in a place, maybe not necessarily a time, Connor, which I agree. Like it doesn't, if somebody had asked me, when do you feel like the first half of this movie takes place, or the first 2/3, I would not have said 1997. I would have said like 2008. It felt like present day. It does not feel like the 90s in any way, except for the page me thing. That was the only thing I can really recall that stood out to me as like a signifier of the period. But
I think they should have had an MC Hammer cameo. They should have been talking about, did you see Fresh Prince of Bel-Air last night? I think they should have worked more of those in.
So Michelle Kwan, you think she's going to have a run at Nagano? I don't know. We'll see.
I don't like this OJ guy.
Yeah. Can you believe? Yeah, I don't know. But, oh, God. No, there's a 9/11 joke there somewhere that I'm going to not even touch. But anyways, we're very much treated to what feels like a very tight narrative in the beginning, like you said, Tony, and we align ourselves with Gosling's character, and we're invested. I feel like it would be hard not to be invested in the early stages of this film. And then Mahershala Ali's character, there's this dissonance where we start to realize that Ryan Gosling isn't just kind of like a rebel. He's also a piece of shit. Like it's not that these tattoos on his face were just bad choices. It's that, they're really kind of indicative of what lies within. But, and I think Tony or whomever said that, he probably wouldn't hurt anybody at the bank. I don't know. That's probably true. He might just have a bad temper, to put it very, optimistically or euphemistically. But so anyways, the first third is quite captivating. The second third, I remember in theaters being like, what the fuck? Why is he dead? He's he must go into a coma and wake up and come back and kill Bradley Cooper or something, and then win over Eva Mendes' character. I didn't really understand what was going on because the structure did not fit into my very nascent critical lens, I would say. Like, I was still developing an understanding of what movies could be. I had very much been on rails for the first 22 years of my life with regards to film. So I was upset, and I didn't find anything of value in the last hour and a half. But now watching it, I really do see the beauty in the story. I do agree with Anthony. I don't think Avery is the most captivating or interesting character. I think some of it has to do with Bradley Cooper as an actor for some reason. He's just he's such an incredible rube. He's so square, and this role only amplifies that for me. And then it's like, well, that's probably what the writers wanted for this character who finds himself in, kind of swept away by forces that are feel beyond his control at times, like his dad, the state senator or state judge or whomever he was on the state Supreme Court. But I even if it was intentional, it still kind of makes the viewing a little difficult, in my opinion. I think they could have done a better job of casting. But it's interesting. We've these two characters just become enmeshed, and yeah, maybe if it wasn't there is some dissonance between like the gritty realism and this story that feels quite contrived at times and steeped in metaphor. But I still found something there for me to latch onto. I think the parallels are pretty stark. I think we feel the pain of the departure of Gosling from this movie, and in a strange way that I don't really feel in other films. Very often when a character is killed off. So I felt an emotional connection to that in that moment, and consequently to his son Jason. And I think the ending, yes, the motorcycle piece is totally like ham-fisted and just stupid or ham-handed, but it's the piece that does interest me is the scene in the forest where he drags Bradley Cooper out at gunpoint to the forest to ostensibly kill him, and then Bradley Cooper breaks down. He's like, what happened to my son? He says, Jason says, this isn't about your son. And he's right. It's not about your son. It's not about AJ. It's about Jason, because what Jason is seeing is he's seeing his dad in Bradley Cooper. He's seen the emotion that he never got to see. He's seen the care that he was not afforded by his own father. And where it gets a little cloudy is like, didn't he see that in Mahershala Ali's character? Is this genetic connection so hardwired that it's like this atavistic instinct that supersedes all else? I would disagree with that, but I think he took some liberties in kind of making that a focal point of this story. So anyways, I've rambled enough. I did enjoy it. It's one of the few films where I found so much more in my second viewing. I think it's because it's been 12 years since I last saw it. So let's continue on. Let's talk a little bit about, there's various ways we could tackle this, but let's go back to you, Anthony, because it seems like you had some kind of constructive critiques as to how this could have played out differently, and maybe through your additions we can find either some fatal flaws or we can poke holes in your argument, one or the other. So Anthony, why don't you go ahead, just expound a little bit for us on this topic.
Well, I think you got to the end of your opening, Kirk. I think you got to one of the big things I was thinking about, which is in a movie about parents and their kids, specifically fathers and their sons. I find it interesting that Mahershala Ali's Kofi, if I have that right, is in there at all, if his character is not meant to do anything beyond being a kind of speech board for Jason to talk about his own dad, his biological dad. Because it seems to me is that Kofi is truly, in some ways, the ideal dad they would all want to be. The dad who steps up for someone, who protects the kind of innocent, who helps out the family, and who truly seems to love and care for people. But what he's there for in the movie sense, or for the viewer sense, is to get beat up by Ryan Gosling's character, just to show that this guy is actually kind of violent and unhinged, and to provide Eva Mendes' character and her mom a house, and a house that he lets, you know, this woman help raise a kid for. And by the way, one thing that like fascinates me about this is, does Jason have a sister? Like, we see this part with the kitchen table is like, there's this whole dynamic to me about this movie that kind of like is not the movie's fault because it's not interested in it, but to me is kind of like, why include it at all if it's just a background detail. Is Jason seems to have this whole situation with his family in a way that actually seems pretty healthy and pretty interesting and pretty like supportive, but he just runs off and runs away from it without any kind of further contextualization or detail. It's like, oh, he just ran off and sends this little thing to his mom like a year down the road of a photo. Like, what is this pull about his real dad that is so aggravating beyond the teenage self that needs to be there? And I don't quite know how to formulate it, but the more I think about Kofi being sidelined so much, the more I start to wonder about Jason and his own kind of personality and who he was before AJ arrived, who he'd be after, and what's his whole plan to go out west. What is this movie trying to suggest in this closing of a new beginning, or in this movement towards a new beginning? And what did Jason achieve in his kind of sudden switch in anger? What did he achieve that Kofi obviously didn't teach him, but is simply there genetically, simply there because of a father that he never knew? These are all kind of abstract questions, but because Kofi seems such an important but background and at the same time unnecessary detail, I feel almost impaired to ask them. I don't know. Sorry if that doesn't help, Kirk. Just thinking out loud.
Well, one thing I was thinking of is, could this be a situation where a side character, kind of really a fringe character, the actor then becomes much more famous and their character is like, sticks out so much more because of that. Whenever I'm watching old films or films from the 80s or 90s, I always try to like find a name I know in the opening credits, like towards the end, to see if there's any names that were like towards the back of the billing, but then made it or broke through. Rarely happens, but I mean, Mahershala, this was obviously pre-Moonlight, pre-True Detective.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kirk, a little. I just watched Mahershala Ali and Rami, where he's like fantastic in season 2. But at the same time, I wasn't watching this movie going, oh God, I wish they kept showing me more Ray Liotta. Or I wasn't watching it being like, God, Ben Mendelsohn was so great in Andor and Rogue One. Like, where's he at this whole time? So,
yeah, that's not fair. Ben Mendelsohn, he's great.
Ray Liotta looked rough in this film. I think it's that's neither here nor there. But it's you raise some valid points, Anthony. What is the purpose of Mahershala's character, and also why is Jason so disturbed? It seems, and I think let's touch on this, Connor or Tony. I think this really comes down to like, what differentiates Ryan Gosling and Bradley Cooper's characters to begin with? Is it purely class? Is there something else? Because it seems like one, potential, the through line here is class. It defines the violence. It informs the violence. It protects or it exposes, right? And I think that's really an interesting piece to it that's kind of transposed, or I guess I should say like laid on top of this father-son narrative, this idea of intergenerational conflict. So anyways, Connor, Tony, like, is it merely like the flip of a coin? Like, are these deeply ingrained kind of, these temperaments, these innate temperaments that we see in Ryan Gosling and Bradley Cooper, one who's vitriolic and unable to kind of deal with the vicissitudes of life. And then we see Bradley Cooper, who's a hero and also slightly, spastic, but at the same time protected and stoic and honorable. Where does that differentiation come from? Is it innate? Is it environmental? Am I making something up that's not really there? I feel like the economic conditions of this film cannot be ignored to fully appreciate the story.
No, I think that's a great point. I think to me, like what connects them is like it's inverting kind of your moral expectations twice over, where you have the, like Anthony said, the noir plotter, you have this kind of this criminal, this, this person who in real life we would regard as kind of an antisocial, dangerous person. But in the context of a movie, we get excited and we root for them, right? And we see him like kind of drawn into the life of crime and so forth. And then he's killed in this horrible, tragic way, but it's by the, quote unquote, good guys. Bradley Cooper in the whole second part of the movie he's constantly being referred to as a hero. Ray Liotta says at one point, like, "Oh, you sound sarcastic." And he, of course, is revealed to be a selfish, conniving bastard himself, right? Not that Gosling was a conniving bastard, but like there's a dark undercurrent to both of these characters who are framed in this sort of quote unquote heroic light, in different senses. So I think the movie's playing with the idea of heroism, right? And they're, I don't know how that intersects with the class question, but that I think is what connects those two characters as kind of dual protagonists.
Wait, can I ask you something, Tony? Sorry, Kirk. I just want to know if anyone else felt this. I did not sense that Avery was conniving and there was a darkness there with that part, which may be something I missed. I thought we were supposed to see this as like a kind of goody two shoes who really would have wanted to root out the problems in the force if he was in IA, but because he's denied, simply goes to like the higher level. And while he has a kind of scene of intimidation, it's like, oh no, this is just another like goody two shoes sort of cop moment for him. That's the way I saw it. I didn't see it like that. So I don't know.
It's all about his political advancement, though. Like he comes across to me as very like cynical.
He's ambitious.
When he goes in and he demands the DA job, he uses that as like a chip. It's like he starts out. It's pretty nuanced, I think, because it starts out. I think there is a genuine kind of moral indignation when he sees what they're doing. He genuinely does feel remorseful and like he's kind of horrified by what they're doing that night, but he uses it to his advantage.
But we see him being interviewed by the DA in the hospital, and we already can surmise that this guy isn't completely, pure from a moral perspective, right? Like he flat out does lie. I mean, I don't blame him, right? Necessarily, but in that situation when you're facing like a manslaughter charge or even second degree murder or something, but so I don't see them as like totally distinct, like counter objects to each other. I feel like there's a little of each. There's some good, there's some nuance for each of them. There's those shades of gray for all of them. I don't know. Even when you see Ryan Gosling going into the church to view his son's baptism from afar in the beginning, and he starts crying, you feel like there's something there, behind his facade, almost a yearning to be good in quotes, right? But an inability to understand how that would look or how that would feel for him. And that's where I come back to class, because it feels very like deterministic within the structure of the movie. But sometimes, like when you look back on life, right, like it's like, we feel like we have agency, but then it's like, well, why do these things keep happening? Why are there, not to dive into my social work background, but like, why are there social determinants of health? Why is 50% of your health determined by your zip code? These types of things, right? Anyways, Connor, do you have anything to comment on? I know we've discussed a lot since you first broke the ice for this conversation, so take us anywhere you want to.
Just thinking about, okay, these are my two kind of issues. I I don't find the beginning, the first bit, as compelling as I think you guys do. I understand from like a visual level and like in terms of excitement, yes, but I think it's very much like it raises so many questions. It's very for me, like I know this is kind of like unbelievable. I mean, what does that mean in a movie? The movie's unbelievable, but I found it very kind of like almost cartoonish, kind of how this whole thing goes down. That okay, yes, he wants to be back in his son's life, biological son, clearly not, being raised by another man. I thought that was again kind of a misstep that they made that such a because it's like he already has the boy, I mean, has this perfectly nice family. I mean, like I just think like if Eva Mendes is the kind of, and frankly the characters are very generic, just kind of the good mother, kind of character. If she is that good mother, I mean, the thing she would do is just slam the door on the guy. Like, why would she like entertain? The movie kind of glosses over. There's the scene where he first robs the bank, and then he comes to the house, and then cut to them, or they go to the trailer or whatever. Cut to them in bed, and like, there's no sign of like what made her kind of relent, what made her kind of change her mind, what's making her take him back. I mean, like that kind of thing. Like, and the fact that now like she will accept this, which is only only brief. It's only for a while, and then that relationship implodes again. But I just found it kind of hard to buy that this. I mean, idea is that he's stupid for doing this. That there's something wrong with him that he chooses to make this terrible choice. That this is how he's going to win, respect, is to take this crazy risk to endanger his life. Why should he want to do that, right? I do think that Bradley Cooper, though, he's a little bit parallel in that way. I guess he's also kind of taking an unnecessary risk in a way. The other thing that's like a real like head scratcher for me, I know, and again, it's not the most important thing in this particular like arc or a bit of the movie, but this idea that like, I don't know, Tony, maybe you can tell us, you don't have to wait for someone to shoot at you. Like it's not like you have to like wait to like, oh, and then dodge the bullet and then shoot, as if that would get you in trouble. Like, that was just like very far away. The fact that was even like on the table. I mean, obviously we can also say something about, the trigger happiness of cops in this country. Like, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but certainly like, I just found it very hard to believe that like there would be remorse when the guy had a gun. He probably would be willing to use it to save his own life. Right. I just don't think like that was very like that dilemma or that remorse, which he doesn't necessarily feel. I think he obviously feels on some level. That just didn't really come across as well. Not that he couldn't feel remorse. Obviously he could, but the fact that this was kind of even a threat or entertained as an idea that, if the truth could come out that he actually shot first, like Greedo and Han Solo, that he would, go to jail. Like, like,
but he wasn't holding the gun, like he wasn't pointing the gun. I think that's the distinguishing factor.
Yeah,
right?
He wasn't threatening him with the gun when he shot him. I think you can't just shoot. I don't think you're allowed to just shoot a guy necessarily because he's holding a gun.
He had the gun in his hand, right?
And I don't know. I think I didn't take issue with that. He
just pointed it at,
and he's also breaking into like the room. So like there's a level of, I think, fear for Avery's character that like makes, I think, to me, it would make sense, like why he shouldn't be worried about it, like coming up like against him.
Sure.
Anyway,
okay.
Sorry, that's just my propaganda aside. It doesn't ultimately.
Guys, I want to say, just for the record, I do not stand for this at all.
Yeah, Connor talking like the Staten Island police union head over here. He was innocent, I tell you. No.
It's just like, I don't know, just that in that particular scenario, it didn't really come across as like so morally gray. I mean, obviously it is a little bit, but anyway, those are just two thoughts. But I find in general that like it's kind of glossed over. And again, like the Bradley Cooper, I don't know, I'm left kind of scratching my head as to how are we supposed to think about him. But I think ultimately he's supposed to be like, somehow that the way that his son grows up, right? The way that his son has ended up, I don't know, is that supposed to be some kind of sign of like this generational kind of evil passed down underneath this kind of like shiny, goody two shoes surface? Is that's kind of what's trying to be established? I don't know. So I'm still left a little bit scratching my head with those 2 points. I think sometimes I find it hard to believe sort of moments as they play out in this movie, but sorry, that's where I wanted to take it. Sorry, maybe that's not where you wanted to go, Kirk. My bad.
No. I think AJ has a case of affluenza, as they say. I don't know. It's one of those things. Well, you could say he's a child of divorce. I mean, that's such a lazy critique, but it's true. Rose Byrne, who's also in this film, and Ray Liotta. Like there are a lot of really solid actors in this film. She does divorce Bradley Cooper, it's presumed, and he doesn't. It seems like he hasn't remarried, which is another kind of strange piece to it. You would think as somebody running for political office. I don't know. Anyways,
can I ask a question real quick, Kirk?
Yeah.
Because I'm still stuck on this Avery thing. Okay, so and Connor's thing just brought it up to me. Okay, so AJ, I guess we are within the world's reason supposed to believe is maybe turned out this way because his father was neglectful. He went off to live with the mom after they divorced at some point. I don't know if they say when or if I missed it. So he went off with the mom, Rose Byrne's character. And like there's this whole part at Avery's dad's funeral when we're supposed to be led to believe that like, oh, he's going to take on his son, but like it's not a great time. Anyway, all this stuff. Here's the thing I'm stuck about Avery, and it goes back to the question of whether I see Avery as a good person, a conniving person, and also a class question. Avery went to law school. He's very successful, apparently, in school. Why didn't he just become a lawyer? Why did he go to become a cop? And also, like, he did not need to do any of this stuff in becoming a cop. His dad was a judge. There's a whole level of like upper wealth that he's already inherited and moved into. And also it's implied that he had a great relationship with his dad. So then why all of a sudden is he just flipped into becoming a kind of neglectful like person? Is it just to supersede where his dad was, to do what his dad did not do? Apparently all we get is after this whole great relationship with his dad, we get this funeral scene where his dad's dying words were to win the election. And like that's it. I just find it really curious that like Avery, if we're thinking about this in the class line, obviously did not need to become a cop in the first place. And he did not need to become a cop to get to the district attorney level at all. And so why would he be confused by any of these questions if he has all this experience coming into the force in which he should know this stuff?
I think we're meant to see him becoming a cop as a product of perhaps trying to move out of his dad's shadow in a novel way, trying to like compensate for his own deficiencies or his own lack of political prowess, perhaps. I mean, he isn't the most charismatic person in the world in the film. I don't know, but also he kind of has to be a cop because he has to kill Ryan Gosling. So, you know, the story doesn't match perfectly. Definitely, there are certain flaws. Connor, I do have a question for you because there are obviously movies that you've watched and that you've had me watch. And I've been in your shoes where you are now, where, you know, I feel like, you know, with certain movies, you can overlook flaws, right? You can overlook these kind of moments where the narrative feels too contrived, where, you know, it's hard to suspend disbelief, right? What is the fatal flaw for the film that really precludes you from being able to engage in some of the mental gymnastics that we often have to do when watching film, at least films that aren't like, you know, AAA canon, you know, universally acclaimed? Like, what was it? Just a disconnect in the first act or just a lack of interest in, you know, kind of the motivations of Ryan Gosling's character? You feel like, you know, it was all just so contrived from the beginning that it's, you know, you mentioned the word, you described it almost as like a fairy tale, I think. Or no, you said cartoonish, excuse me. So it felt so detached immediately, felt so synthetic. Is that an accurate summation, that there was never a moment for you to like latch onto it and then build off of that momentum?
It's true. Yeah. I mean, I think yes, but of course, like I understand this kind of nitpicking, like what does it really do? And like, what is it really like? What is the point here? But I guess what I would say is that, yeah, there would need to be something else that kind of draws you in such that you ignore these other details, or that things can be kind of symbolically true, or they don't have to be literally true. They don't have to be like necessarily realistic. They can just have some kind of, I just want to say they make some kind of sense. But often like in movies, we want things to be actually surprising. So I don't know. That's like a very deep question. I'm not sure I can pinpoint something that really, I felt this, I did feel this disconnect from the characters, and how can I explain how that happens? I don't know what would be different. Was there a first moment? I think just during that, like the bank robbery discussion, just like this idea of like, I don't know, just the guy who seems to be super nice. He's like, yeah, I'll get you a job, and then I'll do this, and then we'll do that, and he's just like, oh, by the way, you want to rob a bank? You know, he's like seems like he's the nicest guy ever, and then he's like, then it's like the GTA 4 mission, pops up, and he's like, well, like, let's rob a bank because that's what we do. That's what's fun, that's what's interesting. It's what the audience wants to see. It's just kind of like, how does that really follow? Why could he not have worked with that guy in his mechanic shop, which he seemed willing to do? Obviously, I don't know. What am I asking for? Some kind of like 4-hour documentary about like
I
how
think
he.
Bradley Cooper should have been terrified of mechanics and shot him in panic, and they would have made it work that way.
That would have had some consistency to it. Should.
No, the bank robbery, at least the first one, was to unlock the second island of Liberty City. I didn't understand that.
You do have to unlock, the other islands. So, but just that kind of thing. I don't know. So it's kind of a non-answer, Kirk. I don't know.
No, you answered. You just felt disconnected to the characters, and I mean, there's so many variables that we're probably not even conscious of that go into that. So, and that's all we can ask for.
The abs at the beginning. I'm like, I do not connect to this character.
Oh yeah, well, when he's flipping the knife, yeah, no, I mean, it does feel. Yeah, it feels very typified from the start, right? Like we know who Ryan Gosling is. Anyways, I think we should probably wind down here and head into the next segment of our show today. So let's go ahead and vote. I mean, Connor, you're already here, so go ahead.
Okay, one more CinemaSin style nitpick would be, okay, the fact that AJ sounds like he's like this, greaseball kind of Guido type when he's from Troy, New York. Actually, I take it back because growing up in Westport, Connecticut, I knew lots of kids who talk like that. So no, it's actually quite believable to me. No, but Kirk, I'm gonna say no. Like there's just I don't know. It didn't grab me in the same way. I really do. I understand why you guys felt the beginning was compelling. I did love like the action sequences. I just think it's a little bit like undercooked, and what the thematic stuff that we're getting to, I don't think is worth the mental leaps, because like, what is it? Oh, like we're genetically like predestined to be a certain way. No, of course not, right? But like that's an idea, maybe that's floating around there. This idea of fate that's kind of class-based, but it's not really saying anything very strong about that. I don't think. These kinds of ideas, I don't think are, unless I found this to be just a very cathartically well told story, other than that, I'm not sure what it would really do for me, even if it's just on a thematic level. But there were lots of things I liked about it. It just felt like a little bit like there just wasn't some core to it that I needed, some kind of like emotional hook or something like that. But I'm going to give it a no, but I really can't wait for Place Between the Pines, and we'll have two. Yeah.
There you go.
Cool.
Okay, thank you, Connor. Tony, go ahead.
I'm gonna go yes. I think made it a point of articulating what I like about this movie, but I feel like there's just so many great little moments. There's a very naturalistic feeling, just the moments of dialogue, the scene with. I really like the scene, for example, where, Bradley Cooper tells the lie, for example, just the way that's written, the way it's paced. It really does draw me in, and it creates this ominous kind of feeling that lasts. And that's kind of tonally what unites those first sections. Again, I said I have my issues with the final stretch, but I think on the strength of the way the movie draws me in, the visuals, the vibes, I like most of the characters and performances. I think it's a very strong kind of thriller drama. from this era. And I think people should absolutely like watch it if they haven't seen it. So I would go yes.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, it's just incredibly unique in my opinion. Something that I have always thought about when I've thought of the movie or seen it referenced is like, wow, that was a movie that doesn't really feel like anything else I've seen. Maybe that's just a lack of, me exposing myself a little bit. But anyways, Anthony, you're our deciding vote here. Go ahead. No pressure at all.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I wish we knew who was most often in this spot because I'm sure I'm exaggerating, but I feel like it's been a while since I've been here. I gotta say, just real quick, one, I did not know Synecdoche. I always want to say Synecdoche, like the Kaufman film, but I did not know this town is one of the most dangerous towns in the U.S. It is extremely violent. I had to look up the stats after the film, but I bring this up because one of my favorite parts in the film is when all the like crooked cops are arrested, and the news broadcaster is like, "The police were the gangs we needed to watch out for the whole time." It's just this random broadcast that just made me laugh so hard. But anyway, yeah, and talking about the film, we spent a lot of our time in the middle section where things definitely drag and where I had a lot more questions and disconnect than connections with the film. I didn't quite see the suspense or the thrill that Tony did, for instance. But one of the things we didn't talk about was the final act, which I actually did relate to a bit more on a kind of intuitive level, even if I wasn't a fan of certain choices or a fan of the motorcycle ending. So with all that being said, I got to give it a soft yes. Place Beyond the Pines, while it didn't fully work, there's enough juicy stuff there, and Orpheus is in agreement.
For the listeners, Anthony's cat just photobombed. Oh, there he is again. Oh my goodness. Perfect timing there, Orpheus. You knew what the DS means, and it means it's time to celebrate and do some serious partying, folks. No, just kidding. So it gets in. Place Beyond the Pines gets in. Very happy for that. Especially a movie that the characters or the actors committed themselves so much to. I don't know if you know, but Ryan Gosling and Eva Mendes, this is where they met and fell in love, and they're married, and they've been married for however long. And also, in this movie, Bradley Cooper hates his kid, and in real life, I don't know if you've read those quotes, but he's like, "I don't really love this baby," so it's a little disconcerting there. But anyways, I'm joking to that extent. It's hopefully he's turned that page. But anyways, let's go on to the nomination phase as the show must go on. I don't know how many movies are in our canon, but we are nowhere near 706, so we have plenty more to watch and discover and debate over. So who's gone least recently?
I want to say it was me. Is that right, Tony?
Well,
I
who
think I
picked
did
this one?
Pee-wee, so
Pee-wee. Okay, sure. Why
I think, well,
not?
Tony,
Anthony, go ahead and tell us the
all right.
order.
Trying to decide. So once again, we're doing the thing where whoever says their movie that decade that movie came out is off limits for the others. I'm very confident in two choices. I'm going to go second, and I'll let Tony go first and Connor go last.
All right, Tony.
All right. So we've thought about pitching for a while. I think it's very castable. I think it's something that I've been wanting to revisit for a while. This is You Were Never Really Here from, what year is it, 2018? 2017. Movie with Joaquin Phoenix, directed by Lynn Ramsey. Kind of almost, it's hard to describe really. Joaquin Phoenix is sort of this man who like finds missing girls. And he's basically given this assignment to track down this girl who's been kidnapped. It's a violent movie. It's a disquieting movie. It's very interesting. It's got a lot of really fascinating directorial choices, really mesmerizing performance from Joaquin Phoenix. I think it would be a good episode to do.
Yeah, no, I'm glad Tony did that. So that's 2017. Okay, so I was very confident about two movies and really struggling to decide since Tony took the 2010s. The other movie, though, I feel is more right because it changes things up. It's not Dogtooth, it's not Place Beyond the Pines, and it's not whatever Tony had us watch last. What I'm going to have us watch is from 1988, or what I want us to watch is from 1988, and it is a rom-com sports film called Bull Durham, starring Kevin Costner, Tim Robbins, and Susan Sarandon. Now, I don't know if you've ever watched this movie or if anyone here has, but it essentially stars Susan Sarandon as a character named Annie, who is kind of a groupie for a minor league baseball team. When a kind of quasi love triangle sort of ensues between her and two other characters, one a kind of has been who becomes a coach for this baseball league, and a kind of star but cocky pitcher. Now, it would seem a kind of superficial film on the surface, but it is truly hilarious, truly adult, and really interesting take in the kind of rom-com genre that just doesn't really, I feel like, exist anymore. Not the kind of Nora Ephron model, but something kind of not dirtier, but a little bit more aware of its kind of adult audience than the kind of romanticized New York crowd. And I just think it's a great way of changing things up. So Bull Durham from 1988.
I've never seen it. I'm all for sports movies. Interesting choice for sure, especially baseball too, which adds another element of to the mix. I'm not sure how many sports movies have we even done? We did Hoop Dreams. What else have we done? I don't know. Anyways, Connor, go ahead.
Well, okay. This is a movie I had previously recommended as a Halloween episode pick, but I was roundly shouted down for even suggesting this was a Halloween movie. Well, now I believe we are as far away as you can possibly get from Halloween. You can check the math on that. I'm not going to bother with that. I'm going to recommend 1994, Tim Burton's Ed Wood. I know it sounds like this would be an Anthony play, but a play to Anthony. But this is a movie that, honestly, it's definitely my favorite of his filmography. I think this is one of those movies that I think is just like a perfect movie. It's a movie about making movies. Of course, it's about famous B-movie director Ed Wood. Notorious B-movie and pornography director Ed Wood from the 50s and 60s. But sort of about this, sort of unknown, odd, kind of marginal figure in Hollywood and LA. In his time, it's filmed in black and white. His friendship with Bela Lugosi, but it's a movie that basically is highly stylized, very funny, very comedic, but really embraces this idea of this marginality, of this being on the outside, being an outsider, and what that means. It's a very heartwarming movie. Very funny, but also I think gets serious as well. I think it's a movie we need to watch for this podcast. Doesn't have to necessarily be now. I'd love to watch for Halloween, but I don't know how you guys feel about that. So that's my pick.
Wow. Okay. That's quite a mix. I don't know if those three movies have ever been brought together in any sort of form or fashion. Somebody out there is like, those are my three favorite movies. Tony, rebuttals.
Yeah, no, it's this is quite a mix. I have seen Ed Wood. Anthony, what was yours again?
Bull Durham from 1988.
Bull Durham. Okay, I'm sorry. No, that actually did sound really interesting. Like doing another romantic comedy, that'd be we haven't done that in a long time, and you kind of sold it well as like a more adult, thoughtful take on the genre. So I'm not opposed to any of these. I'm not particularly excited to watch Ed Wood again. I'm not shitting on the movie. That's not the vibe I'm feeling right now. Even if it is, National Ed Wood Day, so it is seasonally appropriate, finally. I just think that you were never really here. I think the biggest knock against it is it's maybe too close an era to The Place Beyond the Pines, but I don't think it's the same. It's experimental, I think, in different ways. I think it's a movie that has this very unsettling kind of lingering note, and is very powerful in how it depicts violence. It's not the most violent movie we've done necessarily, but there is something that's frightening and frank about its depictions of violence that really it kind of accentuate the performances, and it's a movie that really sucks you in. And I think even if we don't pick it, you should still very much watch it. It's a kind of a recent classic, so that's my pitch.
All right, Tony. Not to be confused with I'm Still Here, the Joaquin Phoenix documentary, right? Isn't
It's
that what
actually
that's titled?
I'm Not There, the Bob Dylan movie. It's also that.
There's, I think that title. There's so many of those. Wish I Were Here. I don't want to be in this world anymore. Anyways, Tony, thanks for the nomination. Who's next? Oh, Anthony, with any rebuttals?
Yeah, I mean, as Tony and Connor know, I celebrate National Ed Wood Day every year. I go all out. I look forward to it all the time. So that film is always going to be given two thumbs up from me. So I'd be happy to watch Tim Burton's Ed Wood. Um, Tony's film, I got to admit, I haven't seen it since it came out, but I thought it was really lame. Like, I could not get into it at all. I know Shay loves it, or did. I don't know if she still would. But there's just something about it I did not find that fascinating that everybody kept talking about, and I just like looked at it like with like hollow eyes or something. And that there's this thing about the ending of that film that I just like cringe at for some reason. I just can't put my like can't put it into a phrase, but so maybe it needs to be revisited. Maybe it needs to be reevaluated. And maybe you guys are the right people to set me right with that film. I'll say with Bull Durham, going back to our talk with class from this episode, Kirk, it's a film obviously with like huge movie stars of its era. Tim Robbins, Kevin Costner, who at one point was like the most bankable man in Hollywood. But it's also just about kind of people who aren't necessarily on the track to becoming famous. They're able to do a job that they sort of love, or at least for part of the time in minor league baseball. But I think there's just something beyond switching genres for a bit into a kind of rom-com, late 80s adult film, small budget, that kind of we should be beckoned towards. But there's also something about just kind of a quaint movie in dealing with kind of the everyday problems of everyday life. That's not just criminal. That's not just high stakes violence, but just love, romance, and the question of passion versus career. So I just think that's all there. I think it'd be kind of fun to do something different.
Thank you, Anthony. All making compelling cases thus far. Connor, Ed Wood, what do you have to say?
Ed Wood's got passion, it's got romance, it's got career, it's got passion, career. No, I can't knock the other guys' merchandise. I haven't seen either of them, but Tony's, I just know. Okay, we just know what's going to happen. The guy who's supposed to be good is actually bad, and there's a violent thing, there's a twist, and anyway.
Like I said, we don't know if he kills anybody. You'll have to see.
Okay. So I have nothing to say to my fellow co-hosts in terms of what they have to offer. Something tells me that almost like Tony's is the outlier in terms of tone. That it'll be kind of the intense one, the heavy one, whereas our two are a bit lighter. But I would say, not that Anthony's is completely light. It probably will have some serious themes, but Ed Wood is kind of a nice middle ground of. It has this kind of heart to it that I think, while also really delving into some real like issues and I guess I'm just repeating myself again. So yes, let's celebrate National Ed Wood Day, please. Plan 9 from Outer Space came out in March 15th. So that's the tenuous connection I'm making. But I think we would all have a great discussion. I think we would all enjoy watching it. But yeah.
All right. Let's see here. So I think Tony's a victim of his own success because his pitch of another movie he nominated, I don't know, maybe over a year ago, Brawl in Cell Block 99, drew me in. And I watched it this week and I thought it was great. But that in concert with the movie we just watched, I'm kind of bummed out and I'm not really in the space to watch another, kind of brooding man contemplating his decisions. So I think I'm going to axe that one. Also, I feel like we, and this is obviously, I'm the biggest culprit by far, but like we've trended more recent. So that leaves Bull Durham and Ed Wood. Uh, God, I've seen neither. I remember even like hearing about Bull Durham as a kid. I think it's one of my dad's favorite sports movies, maybe. Ed Wood, is there enough there to get me over the hump? Because I feel like, it's at a disadvantage with the fact that, it's baseball season. We're transitioning to warmer weather. It feels like it checks a lot of boxes for me. More lighthearted, though I hear you saying that Ed Wood is also lighthearted as well. I think the deciding factor, unironically, is the fact that Tim Burton directed Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and thus I will choose Bull Durham because I could not stand that fucking disgrace of a movie in Pee-wee. So I will have to go with Bull Durham. Anthony, you're the winner. I'm only partly serious, but congratulations, Anthony. Let's hear. What do we have in store for us? Or is this going to be a great episode?
It'll be a great episode, Kirk. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. And for Connor, I'll just say home. I have no home. The jungle is my home. Favorite line from Ed Wood. We'll discuss it one day. Until then, I'll have what she's having.